Her ex had more stamina. My wife's cruel Thanksgiving joke blew up her entire world. She laughed. Nothing to be thankful for in bed, not with my husband. And that single joke, screamed across our Thanksgiving table, was the final nail in our marriage's coffin. What my wife didn't know was that her cruel humor would ignite a transformation so profound it would leave her utterly paralyzed with shock the very next morning. This isn't just a story, it's a front-row seat to the explosive aftermath of disrespect, and how one man's quiet resolve unleashed a consequence no one saw coming. Hey everyone, and welcome to a story that will pull you into the silent battles fought behind closed doors, a tale of reclaiming identity and the shocking fallout when unspoken truths finally explode. This isn't just entertainment. It's a stark mirror reflecting the hidden costs of disrespect in relationships. This is the only weight I've got left to carry. The air in our house, usually a symphony of laughter and comfort, now felt heavy, suffocating. Thanksgiving, a holiday meant for peace and gratitude, was anything but for me. Michael. I sat at the end of our crowded dining table, a forced smile plastered on my face, watching my wife Serena giggle with her friend, Chloe. The scent of roasted turkey and warm apple pie mingled with the soft clatter of glasses and the cheerful hum of family and guests, a deceptive picture of domestic bliss. The table, adorned with golden leaves and flickering candles, cast a warm, inviting glow. A perfect scene, a perfect lie. Then Serena's voice cut through the air, sharp and clear. Nothing to be thankful for in bed, she declared, her words echoing, loud enough for every single person to catch. Chloe nearly choked on her wine before erupting into wild laughter. A collective hush fell over the table, the silence heavier than any spoken word. My brother-in-law David cleared his throat awkwardly, his eyes darting to mine. Serena, however, merely smirked, clearly thrilled with her public joke at my expense. I had, over the years, grown accustomed to her barbs, her uncanny ability to make me the target of her humor, especially in front of others. But this time, the sting was sharper, the wound deeper. This wasn't a careless slip in private, the kind I could easily brush off. No, she wanted an audience. She craved the spotlight, the performance, and the agony was knowing every pair of eyes at that table was fixed on me, waiting to see my reaction, waiting for me to play my assigned role. I slowly set my glass down, my jaw clenching, fingers pressing against the delicate stem. I forced out a thin smirk, a practiced mask I wore to maintain composure, to avoid the messy public fights she seemed to thrive on. But beneath that facade, a slow, furious burn ignited. The strained laughter that followed, hesitant and unsure, told me that even the guests felt the shift, sensing the dangerous edge in her words. Chloe, perhaps sensing the tension, nudged Serena playfully. Come on, Rena, cut him some slack. Maybe it's just a rough season. More chuckles, more glances in my direction, more weight pressing against my chest. My fists curled beneath the table, hidden from view. I told myself, as I always did, to let it go. Nod, smile, pretend it didn't cut. Pretend it wasn't just another in the long, exhausting line of cheap jabs she loved to throw. But something inside me finally snapped. It wasn't a violent explosion. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't pound the table or demand an apology. That wasn't my way, not my nature. Instead, with deliberate slowness, I lifted my glass, took a sip, and locked my eyes on hers. Serena's smug grin faltered, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. She had expected me to laugh, to shrug, to fall back into the role of the weak, complacent husband she had so carefully sculpted me into over the years. But I didn't. I let the silence stretch between us, my gaze unwavering, my thin smirk firm, and in that pregnant pause, I made a choice, a silent vow that echoed through every fiber of my being. I wasn't letting this pass. Not tonight. Not ever again. For the rest of the meal, I remained quiet, a phantom presence at my own table. David rambled on about football, and I nodded along, even forcing a weak, hollow laugh at one of his dull jokes. But my mind was miles away, replaying Serena's words, her sneering tone, her triumphant grin as she soaked in the laughter that followed her cruel declaration. I found myself watching her through the evening, observing her laugh and drink as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just publicly humiliated her husband. Meanwhile, a storm, silent and destructive, churned inside me. She truly believed it was just another jab, another careless line that would vanish into the ether like all the rest. But she was profoundly, tragically wrong. When dessert was served, a beautiful pumpkin pie that I usually adored, I barely touched my plate. Chloe continued to crack jokes. Serena sipped her wine, her eyes bright, and the rest of the table, bless their hearts, pretended not to notice the palpable shift in my mood. Maybe they thought I was simply tired after a long day of hosting. Maybe they assumed I'd laugh it off, as I always had, a predictable character in her predictable play. But I wasn't tired. I was done. Utterly, irrevocably done. When the last dishes were cleared and the guests began to trickle out, I stood near the front door, offering polite thanks for their attendance. Serena, ever the vivacious hostess, was still lively, hugging Chloe and laughing as if the night had been an unblemished success. David clapped me on the shoulder before he left, his expression unreadable, but his tone quiet, almost concerned. "See you later, man," he murmured, a hint of something deeper in his voice. He knew something was wrong, even if he didn't know the full, ugly story. I managed a thin, brittle smile in response. When the house finally emptied and the last car drove away, Serena stretched with a long sigh of satisfaction. "That went well," she declared, oblivious. "Chloe was hilarious tonight." I didn't respond. I simply walked into the dining room, now a chaotic mess of crumbs and discarded napkins, and began to stack plates with slow, deliberate movements. My head was full, my mind racing with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. She had no idea that tonight had fundamentally changed something, that the game was over, that I was finished playing along. The house felt heavy now, the silence broken only by the low hum of the dishwasher and the faint, melancholic hiss of dying candles. And I carried plates into the kitchen, moving carefully, holding myself steady even as a white-hot anger stirred beneath my skin, a volcanic pressure building within me. Across the room, Serena hummed a cheerful tune while wiping down the counters, looking utterly proud of herself, as if she had just delivered a flawless, award-winning performance. Her words, those venomous words, echoed in my mind. Nothing to be thankful for in bed, tossed out so casually, with such utter disregard. It was as if I was nothing, a mere prop in her grand narrative. Chloe's burst of laughter had amplified the sting, twisting the knife deeper. And now Serena carried on, humming, smiling, as if she hadn't just cut me down in front of everyone we knew. I drew a slow, deliberate breath, carefully weighing how to handle the situation. I wasn't the kind of man who shouted or slammed doors. I had always prided myself on avoiding messy fights, on sidestepping pointless drama. But tonight was different. The way she had laughed at me with such blatant disregard for my feelings, for how those words would land, had flipped a switch inside me. For the first time in years, perhaps even in our entire 10-year marriage, I simply could not let it pass. I set a plate down on the counter with more force than I intended. The sharp clatter finally made Serena glance up, startled. "You okay?" she asked, her brow furrowing slightly, a hint of genuine surprise in her voice. I turned slowly, resting my hands on the edge of the sink, my gaze steady. "Do you even realize what you said tonight?" I asked, my voice calm but laced with an undeniable edge. Her brow furrowed further, a defensive posture already forming. "What are you talking about?" she challenged, her tone dismissive. At dinner, I reiterated, keeping my voice firm, refusing to let it waver. That comment about having nothing to be thankful for in bed. She rolled her eyes, letting out a short, scoffing laugh. Oh, that. Michael, it was just a joke. There it was again. The same dismissive tone, the same infuriating brush-off. My feelings, my humiliation, treated as nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle to her endless amusement. I let out a slow, controlled breath. A joke, I repeated, my voice flat. At my expense. In front of everyone. She sighed, a sound of profound boredom, as if I were wasting her precious time. You're being too sensitive. It wasn't serious. I studied her face, the easy indifference with which she dismissed my pain. You do this a lot, Serena, I said quietly, my voice almost a whisper, yet it carried the weight of years of unspoken hurt. She raised an eyebrow, a practiced gesture of feigned innocence. Do what? She asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Turn me into the punchline, I stated, my words precise, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Serena groaned dramatically, running a hand through her hair. Oh my God, Michael, really? People laughed. It's not a big deal. I didn't look away, my gaze holding hers. It is to me. That made her pause. Not because she suddenly understood the depth of my hurt, but because she hadn't expected me to push back. Normally, by now, I would have dropped it. I would have shaken my head, muttered something about it not being worth the argument, and allowed her to get away with it, as I always did. Not tonight. She let out an exasperated sigh, a theatrical display of her frustration. Look, I didn't mean anything by it. Chloe and I were just messing around. You know how we are. I tilted my head slightly, a subtle gesture that conveyed a world of meaning. Yeah, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I do. I saw a flicker of annoyance cross her face, a fleeting hint of genuine irritation. What's that supposed to mean? She snapped, her composure beginning to crack. It means I know how you are, I replied, my voice level, but with an unmistakable edge underneath. I know how you like to get laughs at my expense. How you take little digs in front of an audience because you think it's funny, because you think it doesn't matter. I exhaled slowly, the words heavy with accumulated resentment. But it does matter, Serena. It matters to me. She stared at me for a long, uncomfortable moment, her eyes searching mine, trying to find the familiar weakness she expected. Then, instead of acknowledging anything, instead of offering even a hint of empathy, she scoffed. God, you are really blowing this out of proportion. I nodded slowly, a bitter taste in my mouth. Right, because of course that was her reaction. It always was. I could practically see the wheels turning in her head, how she was already preparing to make me the problem, how she would twist this into me being overly sensitive, me not being able to take a joke, me making a big deal out of nothing. But she wasn't going to win this one, not anymore. I pushed off the counter, turning my back to her and resuming the task of loading the dishwasher. I wouldn't argue with her. I wouldn't explain myself again. And that, I realized, was what made her truly nervous. She hated it when I stopped reacting, when I shut down instead of engaging in her little back and forths, her endless cycles of blame and deflection. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, her eyes narrowed, watching my every move. Oh, come on, she scoffed, her voice laced with thinly veiled exasperation. Don't do that thing where you act all broody and silent. Just say what you need to say. I didn't look at her, my focus entirely on the silverware I was meticulously arranging. I already did, I replied, my voice flat, final. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. She was waiting for me to crack, for me to roll my eyes and give in, to move on as I always had. But I didn't. Instead, I wiped my hands on a towel, turned, and walked out of the kitchen. "Michael!" she called after me, her voice a mixture of anger and a dawning apprehension. I didn't stop. I wasn't interested in another argument where she played the same tired, manipulative game. I wasn't interested in another night of pretending everything was fine, of living a lie. As I walked upstairs, a strange, profound sense of clarity settled over me, chilling and liberating at the same time. I wasn't just angry. I was done. I didn't know what that meant yet, what the practical implications would be. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't going to let Serena dictate how I felt anymore. I wasn't going to keep letting her belittle me, humiliate me, and dismiss me under the guise of humor. And if she couldn't bring herself to respect me, then perhaps it was time I started respecting myself enough to walk away. As I closed the bedroom door behind me, softly, deliberately, I felt something profound shift inside me. For the first time in a very long time, I felt an undeniable sense of control. The house was still steeped in the pre-dawn darkness when I woke up at precisely 5:12 a.m., the kind of hour where everything outside felt untouched, pristine, waiting. Serena was still asleep beside me, her breath slow and even, her face peaceful in the dim light. I stared at the ceiling, my mind replaying the events of the previous night. The sharp, cutting edge of her words still lingered in my chest, a phantom ache. But something was different this time. It wasn't just anger festering within me, it was motivation, a powerful, driving force. I slipped out of bed carefully, not bothering to turn on the light. I moved through the familiar darkness of our bedroom, pulling on an old pair of sweatpants and a faded hoodie. Normally, my mornings began with a groggy scroll through my phone, sipping coffee, letting the day roll over me like I was a passive passenger in my own life. But not today. Today, I had a plan, a terrifying, exhilarating plan. I grabbed my car keys, a forgotten relic of a more independent past, and stepped outside. The early morning chill bit at my exposed skin, sharp and invigorating. The sky was still an inky black, the streets empty except for a few distant porch lights flickering like tired sentinels. It had been years since I'd done this, left the house before sunrise with an actual, tangible purpose. 15 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour gym, a place I hadn't stepped foot in for what felt like an eternity. The neon sign buzzed faintly in the cold, crisp air, a beacon in the quiet darkness. I used to come here all the time, back when I felt like myself, back when I had a semblance of control over my own life, my own body. Somewhere along the way, I'd let that slip. I'd allowed myself to fall into a soul-crushing pattern of just existing, merely enduring, instead of truly living. I wasn't going to be that guy anymore. The gym was nearly empty, save for a few dedicated early risers, silent figures moving with determined purpose. The familiar scent of rubber mats and faint disinfectant filled the air, a scent that instantly transported me back in time. The moment I stepped inside, I felt something profound shift within me, an old memory, an old version of myself, slowly waking up. I used to love this. The challenge. The discipline. The feeling of pushing myself past perceived limits, of proving my own strength. I approached the front desk, where a young guy in his early 20s barely looked up from his phone, engrossed in a game. "You a member?" he mumbled, his voice muffled. "I used to be," I said, my voice steadier, more confident than I had expected. Minutes later, I was holding a fresh membership card, a tangible symbol of my new resolve. And for the first time in years, I actually felt in control of something, of my life, of my future. I started slow on the treadmill, easing myself into the rhythmic thud of my own footsteps. The belt hummed beneath me as I pushed forward, my lungs burning with the harsh reminder that I hadn't done this in a very long time. But with each step, with each gasping breath, I felt something old and familiar returning. The version of myself I'd lost somewhere along the way, buried under years of neglect and dismissal. After the treadmill, my legs aching, I moved to the weights. My muscles trembled as I gripped the dumbbells, the weight heavier than I remembered, a testament to how far I'd let myself go. But I pushed through it, refusing to give in. Every rep, every strained lift, felt like I was reclaiming a tiny piece of myself, a piece Serena had chipped away, one dismissive remark at a time over the years. I wasn't thinking about her anymore. I was thinking about me. Halfway through my workout, sweat dripping down my temple, a familiar voice cut through the rhythmic clanking of weights. "Michael?" I turned, surprised, and saw Ben standing near the benches, a friendly smirk on his face. Ben and I used to work together years ago before he switched jobs. He'd always been one of those effortlessly disciplined guys, fit, motivated, radiating an inner strength. Looking at him now, I could tell he hadn't let himself slip, not like I had. "Man, it's been a while," he said, clapping me on the back with genuine warmth. I nodded, catching my breath, a slight grin touching my lips. "Yeah, trying to get back into it." Ben smirked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Good. You look like you needed this." I laughed, shaking my head, a genuine, unforced laugh that surprised even myself. "You have no idea." We fell into conversation easily, the years between us melting away. He asked about work, I asked about his family, and somehow, inevitably, the conversation veered toward the real reason I was here. "She still got you on a leash?" he asked, only half joking, his eyes twinkling knowingly. I exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of my neck, the old discomfort resurfacing briefly. "Not for long," I replied, the words carrying a new conviction. His eyebrows lifted slightly, a silent question. "That bad?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stared at the barbell in front of me, feeling the accumulated weight of everything Serena had said, everything she had done, every casual humiliation over the years. Finally, I met his eyes, a raw honesty in my gaze. I let myself fade. And I'm done doing that." Ben studied me for a moment, his expression thoughtful, before nodding slowly. "Then stop talking about it," he said, his voice firm but encouraging, "and do something." I grinned, a wide, genuine grin this time. "That's the plan." By the time I finished my workout, my muscles ached in a way I hadn't felt in years. It was a good ache, a satisfying soreness, the kind that reminded me I was alive, that I was capable of something more than just existing. I drove home just as the sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in glorious hues of gold and orange. The house was still quiet when I stepped inside, the air cool and still. Serena wasn't up yet. Good. I took a long, hot shower, letting the water wash away the sweat, the exhaustion, the old version of myself I was leaving behind. When I stepped out, I didn't feel drained. I felt recharged, invigorated, for the first time in a very long time. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone I recognized, someone I was proud of. By the time Serena finally woke up, I was already dressed, sipping coffee at the kitchen counter, a newspaper open in front of me. She walked in, still groggy, stretching languidly as she reached for her favorite mug. She glanced at me, her brow furrowing slightly, a hint of confusion in her eyes. "You're up early," she observed, her voice thick with sleep. I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the warmth. "Yeah." She eyed my gym bag, still on the floor near the door, the slight sheen of sweat still on my skin. "Did you go somewhere?" she asked, her tone subtly shifting, a hint of suspicion creeping in. I met her gaze, taking my time before answering, enjoying the slight discomfort I saw in her eyes. Yeah, I said simply. I did. She waited, expecting me to elaborate, to explain myself, to account for my whereabouts, as I always had. But I didn't. I just took another sip of coffee and picked up my phone, scrolling through emails with feigned nonchalance. Serena frowned but didn't press it, not yet. But I saw the wheels turning in her head, the gears of her manipulative mind grinding. She was used to being the one in control, dictating the tone of our conversations, the rhythm of our lives. She wasn't going to like this new version of me, this independent, self-assured Michael. And honestly, for the first time in years, I didn't care. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't living for Serena. I was living for me. At work that day, I felt profoundly different. Lighter in a way that had nothing to do with gravity. Not physically, of course. My muscles still burned from the workout, a constant reminder of how far I still had to go. But mentally, it was as if a switch had flipped inside me, permanently altering my perspective. For years, I'd moved through my days on autopilot, merely existing, always braced for the next sarcastic remark, the next dismissive eye roll, the next moment where Serena would subtly, cruelly remind me that I wasn't enough. But not today. Today, I had a plan. My coworker, Ben, leaned against my desk with a knowing smirk. "You look different," he observed, his eyes twinkling. When I asked how, he said I looked more awake, more present. He mentioned he hadn't seen me at lunch yesterday and had figured I was buried under Serena's latest never-ending to-do list. I simply told him I had other things to do. He paused, then noted, "You almost sound like a man with a life outside his wife." I met his gaze, a quiet confidence settling over me. "Maybe I am," I said, a faint smile playing on my lips. This pattern, this quiet rebellion continued over the following weeks. I'd work out religiously, pushing my body harder each day, coming home later than usual, not ridiculously late, not enough to cause a full-blown argument, but just late enough to get under her skin, to subtly disrupt her sense of control, late enough that I didn't text updates about where I was or when I'd be home. I started meeting up with guys from the gym for drinks, something I hadn't done in years, something that felt incredibly liberating. It wasn't about the drinks or even the company necessarily. It was about reclaiming my time, my choices, my independence. And Serena, as expected, hated it. She'd be waiting when I got home, always pretending she wasn't, scrolling through her phone but clearly itching for a confrontation. When she'd finally ask where I'd been, her voice laced with thinly veiled accusation, I'd simply say, "Out." When she'd press for details, demanding an account of my activities, I'd shrug casually and say I grabbed drinks with guys from the gym. She hated that answer. Not because she genuinely cared where I was, but because I hadn't felt the need to run it by her first, to seek her permission, to consult her schedule. One evening, I came home to find her waiting at the kitchen table, a glass of wine in front of her, her expression unreadable, a carefully constructed mask. "What's up?" I asked, my voice calm, unafraid. She fixed me with a hard stare. "You should tell me," she said, her voice low, dangerous. "You've been different. And it's sudden." I met her gaze, refusing to back down. "Maybe it wasn't sudden," I suggested, my voice even. "Maybe you just never noticed before, because you didn't care enough to see it." During our subsequent confrontations, she would grow increasingly frustrated, demanding to know what was going on with me, accusing me of acting different, of barely talking to her. I'd simply ask if that wasn't what she wanted, subtly reminding her how she'd spent years making me the punchline of every conversation, treating me like a joke in front of her friends. She'd get defensive, claiming that wasn't fair, but I'd challenge her, bringing it back to that fateful Thanksgiving night. "If I had made a comment like that about you at Thanksgiving, how would you have reacted?" Silence. Long, uncomfortable silence. She knew exactly how she would have reacted. Furiously. She would have been livid, would have demanded an apology, stewed in resentment for days, weeks, perhaps even months. But when it was me, it was just a joke. I told her, calmly, firmly, that I had a fundamental problem with how she treated me, with the way she talked about me when other people were around, with the fact that she only cared now because she felt like she was losing control. She tried to argue, to interrupt, but I cut her off, the truth that had been building inside me for years finally bursting forth. "I was never your husband," I said, my voice unwavering, laced with an undeniable sadness. "I was just your favorite punchline." The words landed like a physical slap, echoing in the quiet kitchen. Her face paled slightly, her lips parting as if she wanted to respond. But what could she possibly say? I'd spent years brushing off her jabs, swallowing my pride, telling myself it wasn't worth fighting over, that it would only make things worse. But the bitter truth was, I'd been utterly miserable. And the moment I stopped catering to her, the moment I stopped playing along with her cruel games, she started to panic. Because deep down, she knew she'd pushed me too far. She just never thought I'd actually do something about it. When I grabbed my gym bag again, a silent ritual now, and she asked where I was going, her voice tinged with desperation, I simply said, "Out again." And when she tried, feebly, to stop me, to block my path, I looked her dead in the eye and told her to watch me walk out that door. I spent the night at Ben's place, talking for hours, finally admitting out loud how I'd been done with the marriage for a long while, but had been too afraid, too comfortable, too beaten down to admit it to myself, let alone to her. When I finally got home later that night, the house was dark, save for the soft glow of the kitchen light. Serena was waiting at the kitchen table, a half-empty glass of wine in front of her, her expression uncharacteristically nervous, truly nervous, for the very first time in our entire marriage. We had our real conversation then, the raw, honest, painful one we should have had years ago. I told her I saw a woman who had spent years belittling her husband in front of other people, laughing at his expense, dismissing his feelings whenever he tried to bring them up, and only caring now because she could finally feel me pulling away. I asked her, my voice quiet but firm, if she would even be sitting here, truly distraught, if I hadn't started changing, if I hadn't started reclaiming my life. Or would she still be joking with Chloe about what a pathetic joke her husband was? Long, heavy silence filled the room. She had no answer, because she knew the truth. I told her I didn't hate her. The anger had faded, replaced by a profound weariness, a deep-seated sadness. But I was done living like this. When she asked if that was it, if this was truly the end, I said, "Yeah." She nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "Fine," she whispered, her voice barely audible, and walked upstairs. But I could see the genuine panic in her eyes for the first time, a primal fear of loss. Over the following weeks, the shift in our house was almost tangible, like a sudden, drastic change in temperature. Serena tried everything. She cooked my favorite meals, lit candles, tried acting normal, tried to recreate the illusion of our past happiness. She even seemed genuinely scared of losing me, truly scared, for the first time since we'd exchanged vows. But it was too late. The love I'd once felt, once cherished, had been worn down, chipped away by years of being dismissed, humiliated, and overlooked. I'd spent so much time and emotional energy trying to make our marriage work, trying to please her, trying to be the man she wanted, that I hadn't realized how painfully one-sided that effort had always been. She'd watch me now as I came home from the gym, strong and self-assured. She'd watch as I took work calls with a confidence I hadn't possessed in years, as I stopped orbiting her world and began, slowly but surely, to build one of my own. I could see the regret in her eyes, A dawning, terrible realization that she'd let me slip away, that she had carelessly thrown away something precious, and now it was too late to bring me back. Finally, one Saturday morning, as she sat staring blankly into her coffee cup, her face devoid of its usual animated expression, I told her, calmly and without anger, that I thought we should separate. Her head snapped up so fast, I thought she might get whiplash, her eyes widening in shock, her face going stark pale. She tried, desperately, to minimize it, to dismiss it as just a few arguments, or to blame it all on that stupid Thanksgiving comment. But I explained that this wasn't about a few arguments. It was about years of systemic disrespect, emotional neglect, and a profound lack of acknowledgement that she had never truly been willing to face. She asked, her voice trembling, "What exactly have I endured in our marriage that made me the sufferer?" But she hesitated, searching for an answer because there wasn't one. Not one that could possibly erase the undeniable fact that I was the one who had been disrespected, dismissed, treated like a joke. She looked at me, her eyes pleading, "Was there anything I could have done differently?" "You could have listened," I said, my voice soft but firm. "A long time ago." 2 weeks later, I signed a lease for my own apartment. It wasn't big or fancy, just a cozy one-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood. But it was mine. The night before I left, she stood in our bedroom doorway, her silhouette framed against the dim hallway light, her voice a fragile whisper. "Is that really it?" she asked, tears finally welling in her eyes. "Yeah," I replied, my own voice hoarse with emotion. "It is. I never thought it would end like this," she murmured, a lament for a future she had squandered. "Neither did I," said, a profound sadness in my voice. Then I picked up my last bag, walked past her, and for the first time in a decade, I didn't look back. The version of me who would have stayed, who would have kept tolerating her treatment, who would have continued being her favorite punchline. He didn't exist anymore. He had died at that Thanksgiving table, replaced by a man reborn. For the first time in years, I felt truly, unequivocally free. This story is a stark reminder of the hidden damage that casual disrespect can inflict on a relationship, and the profound strength it takes to reclaim your self-worth. If Michael's journey resonated with you, if you've ever felt trapped or dismissed, hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful narratives of personal growth, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to draw a line in the sand in a relationship? What was your turning point? We're eager to hear your stories of resilience and change.